Good evening, everyone. Very late. Good evening. It's almost 10 o'clock. It is September 22nd, 2024. It is Sunday. And the title that I got today, after a very interesting long day, has been Love the Stranger, the Fatherless, and the Widow. Now, this is bouncing off of my activities today, and then also a passage that we read, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, from Deuteronomy 10, about what does God require of thee? To fear the Lord. And then it kept on going down to 10 verse 18. He doth execute the judgment, or justice in other translations, of the fatherless and widow, and loveth the stranger, in giving him food and raiment. And let's read that whole section in context. So I read this passage a couple days ago, but we're going to focus on a different nugget of it this time. So we are going to start Deuteronomy chapter 10, starting in verse 12. And now, Israel, what doth the Lord thy God require of thee, but to fear the Lord thy God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, and to serve the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command thee this day for thy good. It's not to harm you. God's commandments are for your good. 14, behold, the heaven and the heavens of heavens is the Lord thy God, the earth also, with all that therein is. Only the Lord hath delight in thy fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, even you above all people, as it is this day. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart, and be no more stiff-necked or stubborn. For the Lord your God is God of gods, and the Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and terrible, which regardeth not the persons, nor take reward. He doth execute the judgment of the fatherless and the widow, and loveth the stranger, in giving him food and raiment. Love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God, him shalt thou cleave, and to him shalt thou cleave, and swear by his name. So what ended up transpiring today was I ended up getting a call from a nursing home that we had been connecting with somebody that was in that nursing home through a contact of one of our family home hubs. And so we got involved because the nursing home was not meeting that person's needs. They have their very strict protocols, and they're not allowed to step outside those bounds. And in this case, those all the red tape resulted in this person not getting the medical attention that they needed. Because their hands were tied, they're not allowed to advocate for the patient, because then it's getting too personal. And whenever you're involved in government systems, everything has to be cold-hearted and no compassion, and everything has to be by the book. But then people fall through the cracks. And so the director of care ended up reaching out to me, knowing what I've done in the past, said, is there any way that you can step in and help here, because you're not tied by the red tape? So we got involved. This person needed something done on the internet. It is so simple, but the nursing home was not allowed to do it because it's outside their parameters of what they are legally allowed to and not allowed to do. And it resulted in that person being brought to my home. And while we're here, we got the internet paperwork done, the digital paperwork done. And then, well, since you're here, let's have a meal. And since you're here, let's do some other paperwork that we can do that hasn't been able to be done. And since you're here, I noticed, actually, he ended up asking me when he found out that I give haircuts to other people, can I have a haircut too? Because that also wasn't dealt with, because no, you have to arrange everything, and we're not allowed to take personal responsibility for that stuff. If you're not initiating and you're not doing all of the legwork, then sorry, we're not allowed to intervene. And it really helped to shed light when a system is built upon legalities, legalism instead of love. Now, there is a place for legalities and protocols. I understand that. But we need to learn to love the fatherless, the stranger, and the widow because God loves them. And then there was another situation, just as I was pondering, like this whole concept of people falling through the cracks because there is no love, because there's so much red tape that when you are in the system, you're not allowed to advocate for the people coming to the system, because now you're stepping outside of your bounds. And then there's all the legalities of, well, this person, so for example, PSW is allowed to do exactly this and no more. Another person who is an administrator is allowed to do this and no more. And everyone has their little box that they fit in, and they're not allowed to step outside of that very controlled box. And take that into a different realm where we've had somebody come through our home where they were homeless, they got evicted, and then they were out on the streets. And they were trying to walk through the system, but there was so much red tape. And because homeless people, for the most of them, do not have telephones, now there's no contact for communication to flow. Because being homeless, you have access to a public library internet for 20 minutes. But if you're on hold for 40 minutes, by the time the call comes through, you can't have access to the internet because you need the phone and the internet at the same time for an extended period of time to get any of the paperwork done. And then you need a printer. And then you need to be able to have access to a fax machine because email is not good enough. And it was just getting to watch how complicated the system was, and that there was no advocates for these people that are stuck. They've fallen through the cracks and they cannot get up on their own. And after this gentleman ended up moving in with us, and we're in the process of the rehabilitation process, you can't order a health card unless you have a permanent address. And you can't get a driver's license renewed unless you have a bill in your name at that address. And so it was just like one thing after the other of roadblocks. But after he moved in with us, we were able to start bulldozing through all of those obstacles. And then this evening, I ended up hearing of somebody else who the family had just evicted, thrown out the grandmother. Don't know the full situation, but where is the love of God? When family members are not loving their own, who is going to pick up the responsibility to love? And God commands his children to love. The stranger means that they're not part of God's children. They're strangers. The people who are fatherless, that means that the Heavenly Father is not their father. The widows who don't have a spouse to help carry that burden financially, practically, emotionally. And God says that he is going to preserve those people. Where was that verse? Psalm 146, verse 9. The Lord preserveth the strangers. He relieveth the fatherless and the widows. But the way of the wicked he turneth upside down. And then pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So that's James 1, verse 27. And the church system has become so controlled by red tape and by mammon and government legalities that it has stripped a lot of the ability to love. That when you have each individual, every joint supplying, it is much easier to love the one person that is in front of you. That one meal that you can give, the one haircut that you can give, the couple of hours to help fill out forms online. Every joint supplying, what impact can we do to start changing the paradigm of how we think? Instead of, oh, go to a church building, oh, go to a government program. How about the person that sees the need is the one that meets the need? Trusting that God is going to give us the ability, the knowledge, the resources, the contacts, and it may just be for a couple hours of passing through, to be able to give a smile, to be able to give a cup of cold water in the name of the Lord. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be inheriting the kingdom. And I can't remember where that verse is off the top of my head, but the ones that are visiting those that are in prison, the ones that are ministering to the orphaned, the widows, the abandoned, the ones that are doing the loving the unlovables, touching the untouchables. Those are the ones that the kingdom of heaven is going to go to. And we need to put God's priorities as our priorities. Sometimes we have such an attitude that we have to make the church service so perfect, and we have to make the couch cushions, or not the couch cushions. I guess in my house people sit on the couch, but in a church building they're in pews or in chairs. And everything has to be just right, and they have to have the smoke machines and the fancy electronics and the best carpet and the newest chairs and the fancy hymnals because the old hymnals weren't good enough, or that now no hymnals and everything is going to be up on a big screen. Is that really what it's all about? Or are we supposed to be demonstrating the love of Jesus? He came to bind up the brokenhearted, to set the captives free, to open the prison doors to them which are bound, to comfort those who are mourning, to give them beauty who were in ashes. Are we actually fulfilling that as a corporate congregation? Not just one person here, one person there, but are we as a whole fulfilling that mandate? Are we going, as you go preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils, freely you have received, freely give? Or has everything gotten to such a degree that everything is all about finances? And finances, the bottom dollar controls everything. We need to get back to loving, and loving with God's love, not with strings attached, not out of our capacity, because I know my capacity today was stretched to the limit. And I had like a million of to-dos, and even like tonight, it's almost 10 o'clock. Actually, it will be 10 o'clock in a couple seconds. And I'm just getting to my video now for the day. And it's like, God, how am I going to fit everything in? And I've got to take somebody to the hospital for surgery tomorrow. That is another one of our community members. that they're finally getting to access to have surgery that they didn't have access to before for years, because they didn't have the right paperwork, because they didn't have the right housing location, they didn't have a phone, they didn't have internet, and therefore they couldn't get the medical attention that they needed. And it's by God's grace this person is still alive today. And tomorrow, God made a way for this person to go and finally get that surgery that they needed years ago. And we were praying for supernatural solutions, and so far we have not had the wham bam, thank you ma'am miracle. But you know what? It's a miracle he's still alive. There is a miracle that a spot opened up to make this happen when it did. And sometimes we get little miracles. Sometimes we get big miracles. It's nice when you see, actually, it's more than nice. It's absolutely amazing when you pray for somebody and you see that stroke reverse before your eyes. Or you see a diabetic foot ulcer heal up like exponentially fast. Or you see third-degree burns on, like, from the neck down and with no skin grafts, and there's no scars within 6 days. And it looks, and the freckles of the old Irish skin was back to normal in 6 days. It's wonderful when those kind of miracles happen. But are we willing to still believe and have faith that, you know what, sometimes God takes things slower because there is a redemptive purpose in the speed? Sometimes the slowness actually allows for another kind of healing to happen. Because practically speaking, if we had gotten that supernatural miracle as fast as we did, the reason for the surgery as fast as the burnt skin healing, that person probably still wouldn't be with us, and they wouldn't have had the spiritual healing and the emotional healing that they've gotten to have because they got to stay in our house longer. When we surrender the process to God, trusting that He is able to make everything work, when we give Him our yes, that He will qualify the called, not call the qualified. I have not felt qualified for anything that I've been doing the last 10 years. And yet, God makes a way, and He provides favor. And even with what happened earlier today, that I was given favor to be able to provide medical support to somebody that I have no legal authority to do, but because I was willing to step up to the plate, I was given favor to be able to say, yes, we'll let you do it. You're considered next of kin. Here you go. And I was able to get things done. And I'm like, God, please remind me what I'm supposed to be doing, because I haven't done this in like a decade. And yet He just brought everything to mind, and I knew what to do. And God got the glory tonight. And we did have the privilege of getting to end the evening with worship, because just as our home is, we used to have an open door policy. When I hit burnt out, we did close our doors for a season. And yet it's almost like God was letting people know our doors are open. And we ended up having people show up today because they needed a hug. They needed a safe place to come. And they chose us. Are they feeling safe enough to go to you? Is your place known as the place where they can go receive God's love? When life has beaten them up, when life has knocked them sideways, when they have ended up evicted, or whatnot, when they don't know if they believe in God anymore and they need that reassurance, where are they running to? When at 10 o'clock at night, church buildings are closed, where do they run to? I know that our home is supposed to be a template. We're not supposed to be the only one. The family home hubs are the new wineskin where people can receive the love of God. Because it is in receiving the love of God that people do not get handed over to a strong delusion. And that's a video that I did sometime in the last 2 months. That when people do not receive the truth, when they do not receive that love of the truth, which is Jesus Christ, that's when they begin to believe a lie and they're handed over to a strong delusion. We start breaking that cycle by actually getting the church back to love. And I know that the people that have come through our home, they have gone on to model. They've sort of copied what we do, and they have become their own little safe houses in their own communities. Each home has different strengths, different metrons of who they can minister to. But we all need to be known for our love, because the disciples of Jesus were known by their love. And how can the love of God be in you if you see somebody who's naked and hungry and you say, "Oh, I wish you well," and you walk on? We need to get back to authentic love, believing that the power of God is stronger than any demon that somebody has. That God's ability to protect is stronger than any disease that somebody might have. That God's love is able to conquer and cast out all fear. We have gotten to see some amazing redemption stories because we were willing to give God our yes in the most impossible situations. And I encourage you guys to give God your yes. Not everyone has the gift of hospitality to do the wild, crazy stuff that we do. But everyone can love. Everyone can smile. Everyone can acknowledge the person that's in front of them and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" And actually let somebody know that they exist and that they are seen. They are not invisible. They have a name. And they are worth being called by that name. Until such time that God gives them a new name. And we've gotten to see that happen too. So I encourage you guys, search your hearts. I know this is a bit of a more solemn, heavy message today. I'm not as bubbly and joyful tonight because the reality that love has grown cold in our society. And if that deep darkness is coming, it's going to get a lot worse. But we can love the people that God has put in front of us. And we can be the solution. We can be the portal of access, that portal of favor for other people. Not to enable, not to drag people where they're not willing to walk on their own, not to be a doormat for the proud and the arrogant and the entitled, but to actually be the solution of love to the abandoned and the forsaken that just need a chance. So have yourselves a good night, and we will see you tomorrow.